Tonight, we're very happy to have with us back Mr. John Perkins and the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman. John advises corporations, executives, and entrepreneurs on ways to make the transition from a death economy to a life economy. A former chief economist at an international consulting firm and a CEO of a successful alternative energy company, he's best known for his Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which was a New York Times bestseller for 70 weeks and has been published in over 30 languages. His new Confessions of an Economic Hitman delves deep into global systematic problems and describes what we can do individually and collectively to correct them. He also has written many books on indigenous cultures, including Shape-Shifting and The World as You Dream It. John has lived 4 lives. He's an economist hitman as the CEO of a successful alternative energy company. A teacher and writer, he used this expertise to promote ecology and sustainability while continuing to honor his vow of silence about his life as an economic hitman. And as a writer who, in telling the real-life story about his extraordinary dealings as an economic hitman, has exposed the world of international intrigue and corruption that is turning the American Republic into a global empire despised by increasing numbers of people around the planet. Please give him a warm Books and Books welcome, Mr. John Perkins.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. And thank you, this bookstore. It's great to be in another independent bookstore. Congratulations. And to all you people that are streaming out there, it's interesting because I recently been speaking to groups of 1,000 people, and last time I was here there were about 500 people. They had video cameras. Now we're streaming, so we've got a lot of you out there, which is really nice to have you, although it feels a little strange. It's more like being on a television show, but it's great to be here. Thank you all. And I guess I'd like to start by saying, my being here begs the question, why would I write a new Confessions of an Economic Hitman 12 years after the original Confessions of an Economic Hitman was published? And there's really 3 major answers to that question. One is that things have gotten much worse in the last 12 years. The economic hitman system has spread from the developing countries to the United States, Europe, and the rest of the world. And it's really created a globally failed economic system, what I call a death economy, an economy that's based on debt and fear and ravaging the Earth's resources, essentially destroying the Earth's resources. 2, people around the world are really waking up to this fact that it's a failed system. We really have a consciousness revolution today in the world. We understand that we're living on a very, very fragile space station that has no shuttles. We can't get off. So we must create a life economy, an economy that's based on cleaning up pollution, on regenerating the destroyed environments of the planet, and alleviating the causes of terrorism. And 3, we're really understanding that we the people have to do this. That although the big corporations really run the system, controlling our government and most other governments, these corporations are totally dependent on us to buy their goods and services, to invest in them, and to support them through our tax dollars and government policies. And so I wrote this book really to talk in detail about all of these issues and also to present a strategy for how we turn this around, how we convert a death economy into a life economy. But before I get into that, I'd really like to address a little bit more about what does it take to change a system? How do we change something that seems to be really deeply in place? And I'd like to share with you a personal story that I think helps to understand this. And you're looking very serious out there tonight. This is kind of a funny story, although it wasn't so funny when it happened. It's a personal story. It's a true story. When I graduated from business school, I joined the Peace Corps. And the Peace Corps sent me to 8 years of learning Spanish. 8 weeks of learning Spanish. And those of you who speak a couple of languages know that 8 weeks isn't a lot of time to learn a language. And then they taught me about how to form credit and savings co-ops. I graduated from business school. The next thing I know, they're sending me deep in the Amazon to the Shuar people. So how many of you have seen a shrunken head or a picture of one? Well, the Shuar did that. You know, about the only people who shrink heads. And so I'm sent in with these people who are hunters and gatherers, and they don't speak Spanish. They speak Shuar. So my first experience with government work was that they teach you a language a little bit, and then send you someplace where nobody speaks the language. And the next thing I learned is I'm sent in to form credit and savings co-ops, but these people don't have any money. It's all barter, you know, my bananas for your papayas. So there's no way I can do what I'm supposed to do. And I'm kind of resigning myself now that I've got a lot to learn from them about a relationship, about the jungle, and deep, deep in the Amazon. And then I got very, very sick. I lost probably 20 pounds in very few days. I don't know exactly how much, but I couldn't keep any food down. I was really, really sick. I'm a 2-day walk through dense jungle from the nearest road, and another 2-day drive in a rickety old wooden bus to the nearest city where there's a doctor. There's no way I can do this. I'm resigned to dying here in this forest, in the rainforest. Then late one afternoon, the one guy who I can communicate with, the school teacher who speaks Spanish, comes up to me, and he's leading this really little old decrepit-looking Shuar man by the hand. And he says to me, "This guy's the shaman. He can cure you." And I'm like, "What the hell's a shaman?" You know, you mean a witch doctor? But this "he can cure you" kind of gets to me. So I said, "Well, maybe we'll see." So this old guy, he steps back and he looks at my feet, looks at my head, looks me up and down, and scans my body. And he steps up real close to me. He's really little, and he shakes his fist in my face, and he says, "You're dying." Really? That's good. And the reason he thought it was good was because the Shuar believe in reincarnation. And this guy figured things had gotten just about as bad as they could with me. You know, it's time to move on. Become an anaconda or a jaguar or a plant or something. Move on. Get going. Move on to the next life. And at this point, I think I started crying. And he says, "Oh, well, shit, you know, maybe you're not ready, in which case I could cure you tonight." So I said, "Well, I'll take that." And he did. That night, he took me on a classic shamanic journey. And during that journey, what I saw, and he wasn't speaking, he was chanting, we were drinking a plant concoction, and I went on this journey. And during that journey, I saw how I'd grown up in rural New Hampshire, 300 years of Yankee Calvinists, very hygienic. You know, my parents taught me, wash your hands a lot. The food we ate was really mild stuff. No garlic, no onions, just meat and potatoes, basically. Now I'm living with the Shuar. They've never seen a bar of soap. And they never drink water. Amazonian people don't drink water because the rivers are all filled with organic matter. They drink a kind of beer that's made out of the women chewing and spitting manioc root. It ferments into a kind of a beer. Then you can mix water with it. Spit beer. Have any of you ever had spit beer? Anybody? Chicha. You had it? Chicha. You've had it. Yeah, really. And great stuff. So, but here I am, and I'm eating, and now, you know, the food's like squirming white grubs that you pull out of a rotting log and down the hatch, you know, and some other even more interesting foods. But, you know, I'm drinking a lot of spit beer because you need to rehydrate in the Amazon, and there wasn't any Perrier water. And I'm eating a lot of these squirming white grubs and other things because there weren't any Cliff Bars. But every time I eat this food, what I saw when I'm on this shamanic journey is that a little voice would say, "Son, it's killing you." I also saw how incredibly healthy the Shuar are. The men are built like Tarzan. You know, they carry dead animals they've killed in the forest, wild boars and things. The women, well, I was in my early 20s. The women were looking very good. Some of them live to be very old. If you're not killed in a hunting accident or something, Shuar often live to be very old. So what I got that night was what was killing me was not the food or drink, it was my mindset. It was a reality that I'd accepted. And later, a couple of days later, the shaman comes up to me and says, "Hey, you know, I cured you. You owe me." And his requirement was that I become his apprentice, which had no appeal to me at all back in 1969. I'd come out of business school. There didn't seem to be any future in being a shaman. Today there is, but back then I didn't think there was. But he saved my life, so what was I going to do, you know? So anyway, I did become his apprentice, and later I studied with shamans in Indonesia and in Egypt and Iran and many other places. And what I discovered is that we human beings have two realities. And one of those realities is the objective reality. This microphone is an objective reality. But the other reality is an imagined reality. It's what I'm talking about. It's our concepts. And we humans are probably the only animals that have this type of imagined reality. And it has a tremendous influence on our lives. In fact, it's the imagined reality that really controls our lives. Our culture is imagined. Our languages are imagined. Our countries are imagined. There is no United States and Mexico and Cuba and China, except that we create this idea and then we codify these things into law, and they become very powerful impactors on the objective reality. And my objective reality was there were these foods and beer that I was drinking. My imagined reality was that they would kill me. But as soon as I changed that imagined reality to reflect what the Schwa have as an imagined reality, that this food is healthy, it became healthy. And I think this is so important today because what we're recognizing is, as I said at the beginning, we've created a global economy that's a failed system. There's no question about it. Less than 5% of us live in the United States, and we consume almost 30% of the world's resources while half the world is starving or on the verge of starvation. That's not a model. 5% consuming 30%. The Chinese can't emulate that. They have 19% of the world's population. The Russians can't, the Brazilians, the Indians, nobody can. It's a failed system. It's not a model. We have to change it. And as soon as we recognize that that's just a concept, that type of death economy that's based on ravaging the earth, essentially, is just something that we've come to accept, and we must change it. And so I think that begs the question is, how did we get to where we are today? And perhaps I'm qualified to some degree to talk about this because I played a role in it as an economic hitman. My official title was chief economist at a major consulting firm. But what I actually did, the main thing that economic hitmen do is we'll identify a country that has resources our corporations want, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our own corporations who make huge profits out of building power plants, industrial parks, highways, ports, big infrastructure projects that will benefit, in addition to the corporations that build them, a few very wealthy families in these countries, the families that have industries and commerce, commercial centers, and so forth. But the majority of the people don't benefit at all. In fact, they suffer because money that was earmarked for education, healthcare, and other social services is diverted to pay the interest on the loan. And in the end, the loan is never repaid. So we go back at some point and say, hey, you can't pay your loan, so sell your resource real cheap to our corporations without any environmental restrictions or social regulations. Privatize. Sell off your electric utility systems, your water and sewage systems, your jails, your schools, all your public business sector to our corporations. And in the few cases where the leaders of these countries don't accept these onerous loans, the jackals go in. These are people who either overthrow governments or assassinate their leaders. I talk in my book in this New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, about two presidents, Jaime Roldos of Ecuador and Omar Torrijos of Panama, clients of mine who did not buy into this. They had great integrity. They did not accept these loans, and they were both assassinated. So that's really the system that we've created. And it's really a first truly global empire in the history of the world, and it's a global empire. It's not an American empire, although the U.S. government supports it in many cases through our military and our intelligence systems. But it's really a corporate empire that's run by big corporations. And I want to be clear that this is not a conspiracy theory. These heads of these corporations don't get together to, dark rooms and in secret plot to do nefarious activities. Many of them don't even know each other. But they're all driven by one single goal, and that is to maximize profits regardless of the social and environmental costs. That's a pretty new goal. When I was in business school, I was taught that a good CEO makes a decent rate of return for his investors. But beyond that, he takes good care of his employees, doesn't lay anybody off until he himself has taken a cut in his salary. Imagine that. He takes good care of his suppliers and his customers, is a good community citizen, pays taxes, and in addition, donates money to school systems and recreational facilities and so forth. That all changed in the 70s when Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in Economics by stating, amongst other things, that the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits. And that's created this horrible system. It gives executives the license to do whatever they think it'll take, including bribing public officials or getting their lobbyists to change the laws so that they're not actually bribing. It's not actually an illegal activity that's being done, and so on. And it's put us in a position where we really understand that in this election year that our president really has very limited powers. It's a symbolic position, but the control rests with big corporations. Even if you have a president that is not beholden in any way to corporations, he or she is going to be surrounded by politicians and lobbyists who are beholden to big corporations. So we've created this system that's based on maximizing profits. And I think what we all need to understand is that we must change this. And I travel around the world since the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman was published originally 12 years ago. I've been on a constant road trip to places like China and Romania and all over Europe and the Middle East and Latin America. I just came from Latin America and the United States. And everywhere I go, I find that people are truly waking up to the fact that we live on this very fragile space station, Earth, and it's got no shuttles. We've got to take care of it. We've got to change things. We've got to turn this death economy into a life economy. Truly an economy that's based on getting our corporations like Raytheon and General Dynamics, corporations that currently make weapons, let's get them to make systems that will clean up the terribly polluted oceans. Mine that plastic that's floating around out there and clean up the earth and clean up the air and come up with new technologies that don't need to dig up the earth anymore, that recycle, that create communications, transportation, and other networks, energy, and so forth that doesn't have to ravage the earth. This is our challenge, and this is something that's very important for us to recognize and to realize that all we have to do is change that imagined reality, that reality that says that the system that we currently have of maximizing profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs, is destroying us as a species, and it's not the system that we need, and it's not the only system. There is an alternative. And you know what? It doesn't require going back and living like cavemen or something. People often think that to change this economic system will require huge sacrifice. It doesn't need to. We can have a full employment world economy or something close to that by getting people to move into these other forms of business and getting the corporations. And I personally think that the corporations are the key. I work with a lot of corporate executives. I know a lot of them personally. Most all of them understand that we are facing this incredible crisis today. And they too want to see change, but they don't know how to make it happen. The power really lies in us, we the people, because although corporations seem to have all this power. The fact of the matter is the marketplace is a democracy if we choose to use it as that. Every time you buy something or decide not to, you're casting a vote in the marketplace. But beyond just whether you buy or don't buy, it's really important to send emails, posts, letting these companies know. And I think what's important for us here to recognize, and what I emphasize in the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman, is that every one of us, every one of you, has incredible power. We all have the power to turn things around. If everybody in this room sends out a post, or to all the people that you know, you send emails, posts, tweets once a week. You pick a corporation, you pick an organization you want to see change. Walmart, Nike, Exxon, Monsanto. I don't care, pick one. And just decide that you're going to tell that corporation, hey, you're going to send an email out saying, hey, I like your products, but I'm not going to buy them anymore until you pay your wages, your workers in Indonesia a fair wage, or until you start producing seeds that don't require chemical fertilizers and insecticides, Monsanto, and you truly help farmers in rural areas and poor countries to develop better seeds, better approaches to agriculture, and so on and so forth. If all of us do this, and we get all of the people that we're in communication with, probably every day by social media, to buy into this consumer movement, this will create change. I recently spoke at a summit of 4,000 corporate CEOs, and when I was invited to speak at the summit, I called the organizers and said, "Why? This must be a mistake. Why would you want me? Who wrote this book?" And the answer was because these CEOs are smart people. They know the system's broken. They know we got to change it. They just don't know how to do it. And every one of them who wants to do something good, who wants to make their company greener, is afraid that if he or she loses 0.5% of market share, he or she will lose the job, be replaced, be fired by the major stockholders, be replaced by someone who doesn't give a damn about market share at all. I mean, doesn't give a damn about being green at all, just goes after market share. And so it's, so these executives are looking for us to flood their companies with social media that says, hey, do the right thing. That's what they need to take to their major stockholders and say, these are our customers. If we want to continue selling them tennis shoes or petroleum or agricultural products, we've got to listen to them. We've got to move in that direction. So it's really important for each of us to understand that we have this incredible power today, every one of us. I'm often struck by how growing up in rural New Hampshire, I had no idea that African Americans in some parts of my country had to ride on the back of a bus until until Rosa Parks showed me that by walking to the front of a bus. How many of you have ever heard of Rosa Parks? Well, who was Rosa Parks? She was a woman who walked to the front of a bus. She did many other things, but that was the single most important thing. You could do that. And I had no idea growing up in New Hampshire that the DDT my dad and I sprayed on the swamp behind our land to kill mosquitoes was also killing birds and fish until Rachel Carson wrote the book Silent Spring and started a whole environmental movement, a worldwide environmental movement, as well as getting rid of DDT in the United States. How many of you have heard of Rachel Carson's the book Silent Spring? Who is Rachel Carson? She was the lady who sat down at a little desk in a tiny house in Pennsylvania, took out a piece of scratch paper and a pencil, and started writing, having no idea her book would ever be published, much less that it would change the world. Started a worldwide environmental movement. So we all have an incredible ability to do that. I mean, whatever you do, whatever your passion is, follow it. And we can all take different routes, but if we head for that same destination of creating a life economy, a system that's environmentally sustainable and regenerative and socially just, we'll get there. And again, going back to my own background, I was a fan, a student of the American Revolution. And you talk about, changing perceived reality or imagined reality. Every revolution has been based on that. So back in the 1770s, there was an imagined reality in the United States, in America. The United States didn't exist yet, in America, that the British Army and Navy were invincible. Strongest, most powerful empire in the history of the world at that time. No way a bunch of hunters and farmers and fishermen could possibly defeat the British Army. And then along came Tom Paine and Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry with their speeches and their writings, and George Washington. And they said, no, that's not true. We can beat these people. All we got to do is fight like Indians, hide behind trees. And they're all lined up out there, these red-coated guys in these rigid lines, just waiting to be picked off, targets. It was a monumental change in imagined reality. That's all it takes. And I'm often struck by how lucky we are that George Washington didn't try to write pamphlets. And Tom Paine didn't try to lead armies. Paine had a passion and talent for writing pamphlets, and Washington had a passion and talent for leading armies. Martha Washington had a passion and talent for organizing men to make clothes, to organize women to make clothes for men at the forefront. They each had a different set of passions and talents, and they each took different routes, but they were headed toward the same destination of getting out from under the British yoke. And today, we're in a similar position. If each one of you follows your individual passions and talents, I don't know what each of yours is. Mine is writing. My passion is writing, and hopefully have some talent in that. But each of you has a passion and talent. If we all follow our passions and talents, we can take different routes, but headed for that same destination of creating a life economy that our children and grandchildren will thank us for. If we do that, we'll get there. Are you guys ready to do that? A little more enthusiasm here. You guys ready to do that? All right. Wake up out there. Great. I'm going to open this up to discussion and questions, but I want to leave you with a quote, and I just really want to leave you with this sense of incredible joy. I mean, I am so excited to be alive at this time. I think this is the greatest revolution in the history of humankind. We're in a consciousness revolution where we're really waking up to how we need to take responsibility for our role on this planet. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to create a better world. What could be more fun? So I want to leave you with a quote, and it's about 200 years old, but I think it's still very relevant. It's from Tom Paine. It's at the beginning of the American Revolution, really, when it's been estimated that about 15% of the American public supported a war against Britain. 15%. Another 15% or so was adamantly in favor of staying as part of the British Empire. They were loyalists, Tories. They wanted to stay British. And the other 70% didn't know what to do. Sounds like these days, doesn't it, in a way? So Paine turns things around. He's out to change this perceived reality. And he wrote in December 1776 in a paper called The American Crisis, he said, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country, but he or she who stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. A generous parent should say, if there must be trouble, let it be in my day that my child may have peace. If there must be trouble, let it be in our day that our children may have peace." And Paine goes on to say, "I love the man or woman who can smile in trouble, who can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. By perseverance and fortitude, we have the prospect of a glorious future." I think why we're all here today is because we've come together so that when my 8-year-old grandson is my age, he'll look back and say, thank goodness those people came together back in 2016 and decided to use this perseverance and fortitude to protect, to preserve, and to create a glorious future. I think that's what we're looking at doing now, and I'm glad to be a part of it and glad to be here with you guys today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So let's take the questions from this side and the answers from this side. You got any questions or comments? Yeah, I'm going to hand out the microphone here.
Thank you very much for your enlightening speech this evening. Implicit in your thesis is that change is possible. In this meeting with all these CEOs that you just, 4,000 of them, so forth, did you sense that they are willing to do this, to accomplish this? Obviously, you think it's possible. Do they think it's possible as a group? What was your reaction from them?
I spent a week with them after my talk, 5 days actually, and hobnobbing with them, you know, going to receptions and so forth. And they constantly, people came up to me and said, yes, not only is it possible, but it's necessary. We must do it. And, you know, these are, like they said, smart people. They get it. The system's not working. You just look at some of the statistics. You know, a few more statistics is that like 2.5 billion people today live on below the poverty level of $2 a day around the world, and another 2 billion or so live at between $3 and $4 a day, which is pretty awful. 70% of the world's population today lives in countries where inequality is greater than it was 30 years ago. You know, and we just a year ago, when I was speaking, I would say that 85 individuals own as much wealth as half the world's population. That's no longer true. 62. Thank you. You read that too. Yeah, right. No, 62 individuals own as many assets as half the world's population. It's gotten worse. Yeah. But at the same time, we're seeing this incredible awakening. So I just wrote a blog about this, and I'd really encourage you to go to my website, johnperkins.org, and sign up for my newsletter, which comes out once a month, and blog, which comes out twice a month. And also take a look at the trips. I take people on trips to Colombia and Guatemala, to the indigenous people, and to the Amazon. Love to have some of you come. johnperkins.org. But just talking in this blog recently that, you know, there's no question that people are getting it. I think the fact that we have such turmoil in our presidential elections now, we have Sanders way over here on the left, and we've got a bunch of people way over here on the right, the left, you know. And we've got the Tea Party, and we've got the Sanders people. And I think that what this is telling us is that there's tremendous disappointment and desperation in this country as there is all over the world. And the right wing looks at solving these problems one way, the left wing looks at doing it another way. But the fact of the matter is everybody realizes we've got to change. And that's why there's such discord and confusion. And these corporate executives, in answer to your question, they really get it. You know, they are globalizing. They recognize there are no borders. They don't reckon, you know, they just don't, there's no borders. You know, you sell your goods wherever you possibly can. And they're understanding this perhaps ahead of everyone else. I think they're a little bit like the Medici. Back when city-states became nations, not many people understood that that was going on. But the Medici really got it. And so they were one of the first to say, well, we don't just want to have a bank in Florence. We want to have one in Venice also, in Rome and Geneva. And so they were highly, highly successful. And so these corporate executives, my message to them is the successful corporations of the future will be the ones that recognize that we must move from a death economy to a life economy. We must move away from this idea that the only responsibility of corporations is to maximize profits. And what I tell them is, yes, you need to make decent rate of returns for your investors. We need investors today because we need to move out of digging up the earth to technologies that really get into recycling, new forms of energy. Solar and wind is great, but there's so much beyond that, that can tap into the air and other ways to tap into the sun and the wind and the tides. I mean, we haven't even conceived of what's possible out there. Not just possible, but necessary. And I think the corporations are understanding that that's the wave of the future, that we've got to move in that direction. I hope I'm right, too. That's the lady in the back of the room. Can you speak up good and loud?
Yes, I have a good voice.
Great. Thank you.
My question to you is, what major corporation do you think is the best model that's moving its top in your opinion, going in that direction?
Well, if I were to pick a real model, I would say it's the the cooperative movement. We have a huge co-op in Spain that actually owns over 250 businesses and employs hundreds of thousands of people. And that's an incredible example. And throughout this country now, that movement is growing, and local banks and so forth. Whenever I mention a specific company, the next day somebody sends me an email and say, yeah, but don't you know that company's, so you can say, well, Whole Foods been doing a good job with organic foods, and then somebody will say, yeah, but they won't negotiate with unions. And you've mentioned someone else who negotiates with unions, but they're not using organic foods. So I think really what's happening, though, is that all these companies are getting it to a certain degree. Walmart now has gotten into organic foods, mainly because Whole Foods pushed them there. And they got a long way to go. But I really believe that all of the companies are getting it. And we may say that some of them are just paying lip service for promotional reasons, but that may be the first step. Yes, and that's why it's so important that you vote and send emails and texts and Facebook postings, and just keep getting people out there. Let all your friends and neighbors know this is about us. If we want to be a democracy, we've really got to do this. And we've really got to understand that our leaders are not going to do it. They can't do it, for one thing. They're so controlled by big corporations. I was having dinner with my friend Louis, who's been sitting right next to you, actually, back there at dinner tonight, and we were talking about this very thing, how the corporations have such incredible control over our politicians. So it would be very important to get money out of the electoral process. One of the nonprofits I founded, co-founded, the Pachamama Alliance. How many of you know of Pachamama Alliance? Great. Please, the rest of you, go on pachamama.org. We're in 85 countries now. And one of our big movements is to back this movement to amend the Constitution, to take money out of the voting process here. And another one is the climate change movement, to understand that we've got to tax carbon dioxide more. But there's all kinds of things we can get involved in. And it's important, I think, that each one of us do get involved, take action. Someone else. Thank you. Did I answer the question as much as I could? Yeah, I think do the research. And, I think something else, if you're in a position to think about this, it would be really cool to have a really good app on our telephones where we can put it up against a barcode on every product and find out how good they are. Make that happen. Okay. That sounds like your passion. You make that happen. Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, you mentioned corporate heads and said that you've met many of them and they're good people and want to do the right thing, and that's good and encouraging. At the same time, there are probably corporate heads who are not good people, who are probably very nasty, greedy individuals. And in addition to the corporate level, there are other parts of the mix that we're facing, including the oligarchs and the Wall Street pirates and the banksters and so on. And I imagine in your previous incarnations in this current life, you've met with some of these people and dealt with them. And I wonder what your thoughts are about dealing with these elements.
Thank you. Yes, the sociopaths. And, and psychopaths. And, I have to say, as far as I know, I don't know any. who are running corporations. I know there are some. I know Enron certainly had sociopaths who didn't give a damn about anything except making more money. And I know they're out there. Most of the executives that I know seem to me to be people who really do care and just are not quite sure how to do it without getting the consumer's help or the taxpayers' help. But even the sociopaths are going to go where the money is. So if a head of a corporation is truly a sociopath who doesn't care about being good in the world, but really does care about self-promotion and doing a good job, and you send him or her lots of emails and say, hey, we're not going to buy your product unless you change, it's going to register, because the sociopath also is going to buy into this concept that has to get on the bandwagon of where the public is going, where the consumers are going. And we can say the same for our politicians. It really behooves us, the people, to speak out loud and clear and let these people know. And if they're people who really want to do the right thing, this will give them the power to do it. This will give them the support they need. If the people who don't care but still are interested in being successful, then they will do it because that'll be to their best self-interest. Thanks.
Hi, John. I'm curious about your time with the Shuar and the other indigenous cultures. When you're with them, do they view us, the so-called civilized world, as kind of misguided children that have lost our way and our connection with nature and the earth? And do they see it as their duty to bring us back to a more harmonious coexistence?
Thank you. Yeah, from the very beginning when I started working with the Shuar, living with them back in the late 60s in the Amazon, they taught me that the world is as you dream it. And that's basically saying that it's the imagined reality that we have, because they don't just mean nighttime dreams. They mean our imaginations, our hopes and expectations. And later they told me, you in the North have had this dream of big buildings and heavy industry and lots of cars, and you gave that dream energy, and so it's come true, and now your understanding is becoming a nightmare. But all you got to do is change the dream. And then just last December, I was with the Kogi people in Colombia. Some of you may know the story of the elder brother. Anybody read that or see it on BBC? Yeah, some of you have. So the Kogi are these people that when the conquistadores came, moved high up into the Sierra Nevada. These are spectacular mountains that rise right out of the Caribbean and go up to 18,000 feet, covered with glaciers, which are melting now. The Kogi moved way high up into the mountains, and about 15 years ago, they decided that they had to come down, and they said, we're the elder brother. We understand the importance of having a decent relationship with the earth and understanding that we humans are just part of that, and we need to be good stewards. And we need to teach the younger brother, us. And so I've known the Kogi for quite a long time and take groups there now every December. So I was just there this past December where they really get into this about what fun it is and how important it is to really relate to the earth, to listen. And I'm taking another group there this coming December. Come with me. Yeah, all of you. It's great. It's this spectacular part of the world where these mountains just rise right up out of the Caribbean. And we go up into the jungles. It's not a difficult hike. It's very attainable. But we get in one of these rivers and float for 2 hours through the jungle with macaws and toucans in the trees, the jungle overlapping. The river is very warm, and we end up in the Caribbean. It's really spectacular. It's beyond imagination. In any case, so one of the things, like one of the shamans one time told me, we're not really threatening the world, we human beings. The earth will survive us, but we're just like so many fleas. And if we get to be too much of a nuisance, Pachamama, the earth will just shake us off. And now she's twitching. And this shaman, it was a woman shaman, she pointed up at the mountain that had a glacier on it. She said, you remember when that glacier was there and it's no longer there. Pachamama, Mother Earth, is twitching. She's sending us a strong message. And if we disappear from this planet as humans, so what? So what? Big deal. The dinosaurs disappeared, but they're still here, kids are fascinated by dinosaurs. We all are. We've got a little dinosaur brain back here. So the spirit of the dinosaurs is still here. Doesn't make any difference. If we humans disappear, so what? We're just another failed experiment like the dinosaurs. But she said, we have this opportunity. We can listen. We can see that the oceans are rising and the glaciers are melting. And so isn't this a wonderful time to be alive and be able to listen to Pachamama, Mother Earth, and actually do something, to take action? I think that's very beautiful. So thanks for bringing that up, that the indigenous people are very aware of this, and they've always been aware of how important it is to live within the bounds of their communities. Especially hunters and gatherers have to, live with nature. They understand that, and for future generations, they're always looking out for things for future generations. Thanks.
You've talked a lot about multilateral financial institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, and how they're destructive generally. I was wondering what you think about some of the regional development banks that have been popping up in the past 10 years or so. There's the Bank of the South in South America, the UNASUR. ASEAN has a new regional development bank. There's a few other regions in the world that have been kind of banding together trying to set up financing systems outside of the World Bank and the IMF.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very gratified to see that happening. And in the United States, we've got the Bank of North Dakota, which is devoted to taking the money from the people of North Dakota and investing it in things in North Dakota. And that's kind of what you're talking about with these regional banks too, Banco Sur and so on in South America. I think if these banks really do what they say they are intending to do, which is to take local money, and they define local differently. Banco Sur has several countries involved in it. The Bank of North Carolina is just North Carolina. But whatever, use the local money to invest in local people and local projects. And I think that's a wonderful concept. I talk in the New Confessions of the Economic Hitman about a great uncle of mine who was president of a little bank in Waterbury, Vermont. And he used to take me around when I visited him, and he'd show me all these houses and businesses that his bank had provided the financing for, and he was very proud of this. And he'd say, I'm a partner with every one of those people out there, and I make sure that they don't take too big of loans. If they're being threatened by foreclosure, I take that personally. It's my fault. And I want to do everything I can to help them through this. And I think that's a beautiful concept, but certainly Wall Street's gotten a long way away from that. The World Bank got a long way away from that. The Inter-American Development Bank got a long way from that. We've also, since you bring up the banking subject, now China's formed two huge banks, BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But China's the lead on it, and AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. And, it's the stated purpose there is to help projects in each of those countries that are members. But it's also now forcing the World Bank and the IMF and the Inter-American Development Bank and others to loosen up a little bit, to be more generous, because suddenly they've got competition. And the fact of the matter is, after détente, after 1991, when the United States became the only superpower, our banks at Wall Street and the World Bank, which is really manipulated by the United States, we're in an amazing position to do great things in the world, to help promote democracy and a benign form of capitalism, but they went out and did exactly the opposite. So to have this competition come up, I think, is healthy, and I really like all the local things, whether it's local banks or regional banks, local markets, farmers markets. These are all wonderful things for us to be getting involved in, and I really encourage people to participate and support any of the local businesses or the local models. And that's why, again, back here when we talked about companies, I think the cooperative movement is an incredibly important one. I'm a member of several co-ops and in the community where I live, and I think that's a really important movement. Thank you. Yeah, but you've already, is there anybody else before we go second time here? I'll get back to you. But yeah.
Hi, John. I found out about you on a documentary called Zeitgeist Addendum, and been following the movement. It's a grassroots movement. And since you're an economist, what are your thoughts on a natural law, resource-based economy, and an economy based on natural law, science, resource management?
I wasn't sure whether you were swearing at me or what by calling me an economist, but I got a joke, okay, before I answer that question. So there's this guy in a hot air balloon, and he's lost, and he's getting real close to the ground. There's a guy down below him down there, and he hollers down and he says, "Hey, you down there, can you tell me, where am I?" The guy looks up and he says, "You're in a hot air balloon." And the guy says, "Thanks a lot. You're an economist, aren't you?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" "Because you just gave me some really important information that doesn't help a damn bit." What was your question?
If you're familiar with the zeitgeist movement, the grassroots movement.
The whole grassroots movement, all this, and back to nature and so on. Yes. I'm totally for it. How can we, and incidentally, in the confessions, in the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman, I go into great detail. The whole end of the book is about what we all can do to turn things around. There are long lists of what everybody can do, what students can do, what retired people can do, what people between student and retired can do, what corporate executives can do. There's this long list, and one of the things is taking care of nature. That's one of the things, like youth. So that's obviously a passion of yours. So really encourage you to get deeply involved in it. And it becomes tricky when we're dealing with people in big cities who live in ghettos and don't have much opportunity to get into nature. Yes, let's encourage them to turn deserted buildings and parking lots into more natural places. So I think there's a role in this for all of us. I think supporting nature, getting people out of nature as much as possible is extremely important. That's what I do with my 8-year-old grandson a lot, but also to recognize that there's some people that we're just going to have to look for other solutions. That's not going to work for some people, at least not now. And we've got to find different kinds of solutions. And I really address that issue in the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That's the main reason I wrote this book 12 years later was, yes, to update the awful things that are happening, but more than anything to provide a strategy that every single one of us can follow, because every one of us has passions and we need to follow this. So yours is with nature, I think, and that's one of them at least. So move forward with that, dig into it, and today it's so easy, relatively easy, to get things started and get things moving through social media. I mean, there's many other ways to do it too. Some of us aren't that interested in social media, so there's many other ways, but that's one of the ways that makes it easy. Growing up as a student of the American Revolution, I used to think, damn, I wish I'd been born in the 1700s so I could have participated in the American Revolution. And now I realize this is so much bigger, so much more important. This is a global revolution. And it's easier. We get the internet, and it's a lot more comfortable. The toilets are better. The beds are better. Or the food's better, So this is an amazing time to be alive. Let's do one more. Do you have a question?
I'm wondering if you have a harder line that you also can articulate. Because I'm not going to downplay the positive change aspect. I'm all for positive change and everybody taking their part. But it seems like there's an awful lot of regulators that don't regulate and bankers that rip people off and stuff. There's a lot more people that could be going to jail, and we could make change happen a lot faster than waiting for co-ops to take over.
Well, absolutely. And again, I addressed that in the book that, recently 6 of the world's biggest banks have admitted to committing crimes and paid just about $15 billion for the crimes of rigging LIBOR and the exchange rate indices. They've admitted to this, they've admitted to their crimes, and they've paid fines. Not one banker has been indicted. Now I ask you, do banks commit crimes? No. Individuals in the banks commit crimes. People commit crimes. Not one banker has gone to jail. The contrast to that is FIFA, the International Soccer League Control Board, and their executives have been indicted, as well they should be. But I think that's a smokescreen to a certain degree, because our Department of Justice here in the United States is indicting soccer officials who, although they control a big aspect of sports, they don't really control much to do with the reality of the world's economy. They're being indicted. The criminals who have destroyed the economy to a large degree, who brought us into the last terrible recession, they are not being indicted. Their banks are paying fines, but they're beyond indictment. We're told that their banks are individuals, have the rights and can be judged as individuals, and therefore the banks can be found guilty of crimes. But banks don't commit crimes. People commit crimes. The bankers committed crimes. And while I'm on that subject, since the recession ended in 2009, 1% of all the economic growth in the United States, 95% of all the economic growth in the United States has gone to 1% of our population. 95% of the economic growth since 2009 has gone to 1% of the U.S. population, while 90% of us are worse off economically, relatively speaking. For every $1 billion of economic growth in this country, the average citizen, you, I suppose, most of you are fairly average probably, as I am, the average citizen out of every $1 billion of growth gets $1. That's outrageous. That's the system we have. And it's been codified, it's been legalized. Corruption has become legal. That's one of the things I wrote about really since 2004, since the last book came out. It's gotten so much worse, where we've made what used to be crimes legal. We need to turn that around. And we need to understand that we've got to get the corporations, we've got to pressure the corporations to turn that around, because they're the ones who are behind a lot of these new laws. Their lobbyists and their political campaign funds coerce, convince our government officials to write these laws. Okay, one more. I think I saw a hand over here. Yes, one, and then we'll do some book signing.
I worked as a psychotherapist in a Florida State Prison psychiatric unit, and I've since become a human rights activist and advocate for the humane treatment of the mentally ill. And as I've gone down the rabbit hole, I am just astounded at an industry that is dependent on amassing live bodies for profit. And we're seeing some movement now. Obama's talking about mass incarceration and a lot of other things, but for me, it's not happening quickly enough. And I'm just floored by private prison companies and providers of services within the prison system that continually put their bottom line ahead of the health of inmates. And it's just staggering. And sometimes I'm wondering, as an activist, how can I make a difference?
Thank you. Yeah, the privatization of our prisons is symbolic of so much privatization. And what I saw as an economic hitman in developing countries where we went in and forced them to privatize, I think we have to ask ourselves, would you rather have a civil servant whose responsibility is to serve the civic, which means the public, running a lot of these organizations, or a corporate executive whose responsibility is to maximize profits for his corporation? And yes, we can be dissatisfied sometimes with the way civil servants have done things, but the answer is not to turn these things over to private corporations. The answer is to make it more attractive to get better civil servants in there running it and keeping them in there, pay them higher salaries, whatever it takes, maybe watchdog them more, I don't know. But yeah, this whole privatization thing, the prison system is a terrible and yet also a very symbolic example of how that's happened. And I would just encourage you to get deeply involved as much as you can. You're already in there, and you know more about it than I do, so I can't answer you from that standpoint, but I will say I think you could start an incredible movement through social media of lots of people. So maybe the best way to work is through all of us, the consumers, not necessarily to try to do it from within the system, which is probably what you've been doing, it's actually both. You're out. You wrote a book about it. You're telling me before. Yeah, so keep going. Just keep going. Don't ever give up. I have to say that Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the original book, was rejected by 39 publishers. I got 39 rejection letters. And then one, Barrett Kohler, who's published this second one, published it. And it went almost immediately onto the New York Times bestseller list, stayed there for a year and a half almost, was now out in 33 languages, well over 1 million copies. So, but the perseverance, 39 rejection letters, that's not fun. There were times I felt like jumping off a cliff, like, come on, but I just kept sending them out, So don't give up. Whatever it is, go for it, and it'll pay off. It'll pay off. Okay, so thank you. Thank you. You got this, get out these.
Thank you, John. No, I'd just like to say I think we owe a debt of gratitude to this gentleman, not for bringing these, not just for bringing these issues to the fore, but for writing them down so that we can all have a reference and go to them. With my memory, I can't remember a lot of this stuff, but it's very, very admirable that you would do this and to enlighten us all and to educate us all. We really appreciate it. Can we get another round of applause for John? Thank you. There's an election coming up. It's not too late to throw your hat in the ring if you're interested.
Anybody doesn't have your
Oh, the
name
drawing.
and email address in here, anybody want to add before we do the drawing? And Lily, you offered to, Lily was just in a program I was teaching in the Bahamas, so we've known each other for at least 2 months. If you wouldn't mind,
Another quick reminder to those of you still watching online, give us a call. We'll get a book autograph for you. We'll ship it to you. Too bad you can't take part in the drawing, but that's for us here. And for those of you here, take part. There's some wine back there if you want to help yourselves to that, and then we can really get into a big discussion. So thank you all for coming. The books are for sale behind the counter. John will sign them for you right over here.